The promise that changed everything. I promise to pay you back when I grow up. The Target store fell into dead silence after those words left the little girl's mouth. Even the self-checkout machines seemed to pause their beeping. A security camera overhead hummed softly in the sudden quiet. A man in a tailored navy suit, tall with distinguished silver at his temples, turned toward the voice that had just grabbed his attention like a punch to the gut. Marcus Williams, once dubbed the Ghost Mogul by Fortune magazine for building a massive tech empire while staying completely out of the spotlight, found himself staring at a child no older than 8, clutching a baby wrapped in a worn Walmart blanket. The girl's name was Sophia. Her dark curls were tangled and matted, her small hands grimy with street dirt, her pink t-shirt stained, and her old navy jeans ripped at both knees. The baby in her thin arms whimpered, hungry, cold, and fragile. Outside, a brutal Detroit winter wind howled, but the chill inside the store cut even deeper. The cashier spotted them and snapped her gum loudly. "Hey kid, this isn't a babysitting service. You need to get out of here." Sophia flinched hard. She tightened her grip on the baby and looked down, already turning toward the exit, her narrow shoulders trembling, not from fear, but from pure humiliation. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying the authority of a man who'd closed billion-dollar deals. "She's not stealing anything?" she asked politely. The cashier looked up, startled. "Mr. Williams?" "Sir, she's... I mean, look at her. She clearly doesn't belong." "I'll be the judge of that," Marcus said, his tone final. Other customers had started to notice. A woman by the pharmacy whispered, "That's the girl who sleeps under the I-75 overpass." A man near the Gatorade cooler added quietly, "I heard her dad's doing time in Jackson State Prison, and her mom's got serious mental issues." Poor little thing. Marcus crouched down beside Sophia, who stood frozen by the baby formula aisle like a deer caught in headlights. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Sophia," she said without looking up. "This is my baby brother." "And what's his name?" "Isaiah. He just turned 1. Marcus softened his voice even more. "You walked here in this cold weather?" Sophia nodded slowly. "We ran out of formula yesterday. Isaiah keeps crying and crying. I waited until Mum fell asleep before sneaking out. She screams sometimes when she's upset, and I didn't want her following me." Marcus glanced at the cashier, who now stood awkwardly behind the register, pretending to organize candy bars. "Are you warm enough?" he asked Sophia. She shook her head. "I wrapped Isaiah in our blanket. It's the only warm thing we have." He stood slowly, his business mind, the same one that had built a multi-billion-dollar empire, now calculating something far more important than profit margins. What do you do when a child shows up in front of you with more courage than most adults you've ever met in corporate boardrooms? "We're buying way more than just formula," he said firmly. "Stay close to me." Marcus grabbed a shopping cart and started loading it methodically. Similac baby formula. Whole milk. Wonder bread. Pampers diapers. Baby wipes. Campbell's chicken soup. Gerber baby food. Thermal socks. A warm hoodie in Sophia's size. He ignored the confused stares from other customers as his cart filled up. At checkout, Sophia could barely reach the counter. She placed the formula up with both trembling hands like she was offering the crown jewels. "Thank you so much, mister," she whispered. "But I really will pay you back when I grow up. I mean it." Marcus nodded with complete seriousness. "Sophia, I don't doubt you for a single second." When they stepped outside into the Target parking lot, the Michigan winter wind hit like a sledgehammer. Sophia blinked rapidly to keep her tears from freezing on her cheeks. Isaiah started whimpering again. "Where are you staying?" Marcus asked without hesitation. When she looked scared, he added, "It's okay. I won't tell anyone who shouldn't know." She looked up at him, still hesitant, but something in his eyes made her trust him. Under the overpass at Gresham and Connor. There's a dry spot behind some concrete pipes. I keep Isaiah warm with newspapers, and I make sure nobody sees us there. A woman loading groceries nearby gasped audibly when she heard this. Marcus glanced at her, but she quickly looked away, ashamed. He turned back to Sophia. Would you like me to walk you back home? She hesitated, then shrugged. People usually yell when they see me carrying him around. But you can come if you want. Just don't talk too loud when we get there. Mom gets scared real easy. As they walked through the slushy streets, Marcus felt a strange weight settling on his shoulders. Not the kind of responsibility you can delegate to assistants, but the kind you carry because walking away would haunt you forever. Are you cold? He asked, noticing her shivering. Sophia didn't answer directly, but her teeth were chattering like castanets. Isaiah whimpered again, his tiny face red from the wind. Without hesitation, Marcus took off his expensive wool overcoat and wrapped it around her small frame. She looked shocked but didn't resist. They walked the next 3 blocks in comfortable silence until the overpass came into view. Cars thundered overhead and the smell of motor oil, wet concrete, and garbage grew stronger. Behind a row of rusted shopping carts and a sheet of blue plastic tarp, a woman lay curled up on a pile of old blankets, her face hidden. She stirred at the sound of footsteps, then sat up suddenly, her eyes wild and completely unfocused. Who's there? Mum, Sophia called gently. It's just me. And this is Marcus. He helped us get Isaiah's formula. Her mother's voice was thick and slurred. You weren't supposed to leave. I told you not to leave. Marcus stayed back respectfully, keeping his distance. He watched as the woman's expression softened when she saw Isaiah, reaching out with trembling hands to hold her baby. She was only trying to help, Marcus said softly, his voice non-threatening. The woman didn't respond, but she cradled Isaiah close, and something in her eyes became more present, more aware. Sophia turned to Marcus. You can go now, mister. We'll be okay. I just needed to get the baby formula. But Marcus didn't move. Instead, he looked directly at Sophia and said, I'd like to come back tomorrow, if that would be all right with you. Sophia tilted her head, confused. Why would you want to do that? He hesitated for just a moment. Then, with the kind of crystal-clear certainty he hadn't felt in years, he said, because someone should. That night, Marcus Williams didn't sleep. He lay in his glass penthouse overlooking the Detroit River, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere beneath the roar of I-75, a little girl was probably humming softly to her baby brother, both of them wrapped in a billionaire's wool coat. And for the first time in his life, Marcus realized that perhaps the richest thing he could ever become, was truly needed. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button to show your support for Sophia and Isaiah. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, someone in your city might be watching right alongside you, *. The Detroit morning air cut through Marcus's lungs like broken glass as he stepped out of his black Cadillac Escalade, hitting the lock button twice out of habit. He wasn't dressed like a Fortune 500 CEO today. No Armani suit, no Rolex gleaming on his wrist. Just dark Levi's, a plain navy Nike hoodie, and a thick North Face jacket. The kind of guy who could blend into any crowd at a Lions tailgate or a Coney Island diner. But those eyes, sharp, calculating, relentless, were the same ones that had once stared down Wall Street sharks in hostile takeover battles. Today, though, they were searching for something far more important than market share. Gresham and Connor looked exactly the same as yesterday. Crumpled McDonald's wrappers still littered the gutters. The I-75 overpass still rumbled with 18-wheelers heading north toward Flint. But Marcus's gaze went straight to that far corner under the concrete, the spot where Sophia had led him yesterday evening. His heart hammered against his ribs with an anxiety he hadn't felt since his first IPO. He was scared, not for his safety, but terrified of what he might find. Or worse, what he might not find. Then he spotted it, the familiar blue plastic tarp, the rusted shopping cart stuffed with broken dolls and bundled rags. And there, curled up on a flattened Amazon delivery box, was Sophia with baby Isaiah pressed against her chest like he was her whole world. Her eyes were closed, but the moment his Cole Haan shoes scraped against loose concrete, she stirred instantly. She sat up fast, alert like a street cat, then her face relaxed when she recognized him. "You came back," she said, her voice rough from the cold Detroit air. "I told you I would," Marcus replied simply. Sophia adjusted Isaiah in her arms, his tiny fist still clutching a corner of Marcus's expensive wool coat from yesterday. "He didn't cry hardly at all last night," she whispered. That formula really helped. Marcus pulled a stainless steel thermos from his messenger bag and handed it over. "Hot chocolate. Real cocoa, not the powdered stuff. Not too sweet." Her brown eyes went wide like he'd just handed her a winning lottery ticket. She twisted off the cap carefully, took one slow sip, then closed her eyes and sighed like a woman finding sanctuary after years of war. "Tastes like Christmas morning," she whispered. Marcus smiled genuinely for the first time in months. "That was exactly what I was going for." A sudden rustling behind the plastic sheeting made every muscle in Marcus's body tense up. A woman emerged slowly, Sophia's mother, one hand steadying herself against the graffiti-covered wall, the other shielding bloodshot eyes from the weak Michigan sun. Her auburn hair was matted and tangled, her face gaunt, her expression cycling between paranoid suspicion and foggy recognition. "You again," she said, her voice hoarse like she'd been screaming. "I brought breakfast for everyone," Marcus said calmly, keeping his tone non-threatening. The woman, Sarah, studied him with the intensity of someone who'd learned not to trust promises. "You work for the city? Child Protective Services?" "No ma'am. Just me." Her eyes narrowed as she spotted the brown paper bag in his hand. "What's in there?" "Egg McMuffins from McDonald's. And 2 thermal blankets from RI." Sarah let out a bitter laugh. "Rich people always think blankets solve everything." "They don't," Marcus agreed without missing a beat. "But they sure don't hurt." He set the bag down near the wall and took 3 deliberate steps backward, giving her space to decide. Sarah reached in cautiously, pulled out one of the breakfast sandwiches, sniffed it like it might be poisoned, then handed it to Sophia before biting into another one herself. "You need to stop coming around here," Sarah said between bites, but there was less venom in it than before. "People like you don't belong in neighborhoods like this." "Neither do you," Marcus answered without hesitation. Sarah froze mid-chew, her gaze locking onto his. Tired, razor-sharp, and aching with the kind of pain that refused anyone's pity. "You don't know jack shit about where I belong, mister." "You're absolutely right," Marcus said quietly. "But I'd like to learn." Sarah shook her head, almost laughing. "Why? You feeling guilty about something?" Marcus glanced at Sophia, then baby Isaiah, then back at Sarah. "Because your daughter trusted me yesterday. And when I drove away last night, I realized I hated how that felt." "Aha." Sarah's voice dripped with cynicism. "Let me guess how this goes. You'll play Santa Claus for maybe a week. Drop off some Happy Meals, maybe buy us winter coats, say some nice words that make you feel better about yourself. Then you'll disappear back to whatever gated community you crawled out of. They always disappear." "I'm not, they," Marcus said firmly. "Sure you are. Expensive SUV, designer shoes that cost more than most people make in a month, eyes that look right through regular folks like we're invisible." Before Marcus could respond, Sophia spoke up, her young voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Mum, he's different. He talked to me yesterday like I was a real person, not like those church people who throw day-old donuts at us from their van windows." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the traffic overhead seemed to quiet down. Finally, Sarah slumped back against the concrete wall, pulling her threadbare lion's blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You got kids of your own?" she asked, her voice softer now. "No," Marcus said honestly. "My wife died in a car accident 10 years ago. We never had children." "You lonely?" He nodded once. "More often than I care to admit." The silence stretched between them, not empty, but heavy with unspoken understanding. "No," Marcus said quietly. "You don't," Sarah whispered back. Then, after a long pause, "But maybe you're trying to. And that's more than most people ever do." Marcus looked around at their makeshift shelter. The air was thick with the smell of wet concrete, motor oil, and forgotten dreams. But he also saw something incredible here, a little girl who still believed promises could be kept, and a broken woman who somehow still had fierce determination burning behind exhausted eyes. He stood up, brushing highway dust off his jeans. "There's a Hampton Inn about 3 blocks from here. I can get you guys a room for 1 week. Just a week to start. Warm beds, hot showers, and a door that actually locks." Sarah's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's the catch?" "No catch whatsoever," Marcus said simply. "You don't even have to decide anything long-term. Just give Sophia and Isaiah 1 night sleeping on clean sheets instead of cardboard." Sarah didn't answer for what felt like forever. Then, so softly he almost missed it, "We'll go." "But if you're lying to us, if this is some sick power game you're playing." "It's not." She studied his face for another long moment, then nodded once. "Okay then." As they gathered their few belongings, plastic bags of clothes, broken toys, Isaiah's bottle, Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk and speed-dialed his executive assistant. "Rebecca, I need you to book a room at the Hampton Inn on 8 Mile Road. 1 week, paid in full. And have the front desk put together a care package, toiletries, baby supplies, whatever a family with a 1-year-old would need. Make it happen in the next 20 minutes. The entire process took less than 5 minutes of phone calls. But for Sarah and Sophia, it was about to change everything. During the 4-block walk to the motel, Sophia slipped her small hand into Marcus's and held on tight. She didn't talk much, just walked beside him like they'd been doing this together for years. Right before they reached the glass lobby doors, she tugged on his jacket sleeve. "Mr. Williams?" "Yeah, sweetheart. You didn't have to come back today. But I'm really, really glad you did." Marcus felt his throat close up. He squeezed her tiny hand gently. "So am I, Sophia. So am I." And as the automatic doors whooshed open, letting them into a world of central heating, cable TV, and soft mattresses, Marcus realized something that both thrilled and terrified him: this wasn't going to be temporary. Not for him. The Hampton Inn room wasn't the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton. The wallpaper was generic beige, the carpet had seen better decades, and the heating unit rattled like a diesel engine. But for Sophia, it might as well have been Cinderella's castle. She stood in the center of the room, cradling Isaiah in her arms, eyes wide as dinner plates, turning slowly in a complete circle like she was afraid the whole place would disappear if she blinked too hard. "It's so warm in here," she whispered in amazement. Marcus smiled from the doorway. "That's the heater doing its job. She's probably older than both of us, but she still works hard." Sarah dropped their garbage bag of belongings onto the dresser with a heavy thud. Her face was unreadable, caught somewhere between deep suspicion and bone-deep exhaustion. She'd barely spoken during the walk over, and now that they were actually inside, she looked completely out of place, like a wild animal wondering if the trap was about to spring shut. Marcus placed a black Nike duffel bag on the small table by the window. Shampoo, conditioner, toothbrushes, clean towels. Pampers diapers for Isaiah. Some basic stuff. Sarah nodded but didn't say thank you. Marcus didn't expect her to. Real gratitude couldn't be forced, not when trust was still such a fragile, breakable thing between strangers. Sophia placed Isaiah carefully in the center of the king-size bed, tucking the hotel comforter around his tiny body like she'd been taking care of babies her whole life. He made soft, contented sounds and closed his eyes, the steady warmth already working its magic. Marcus leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "I'll swing by tomorrow to check on you guys. You've got complete privacy here. I told the front desk not to ask any questions, and they won't." Sarah finally broke her silence. "You make a habit of this kind of thing?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "This is completely new territory for me." She studied his face intently. "You don't exactly look like the bleeding heart charity type." "I'm not." "Then why are you doing this?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I have the resources to help, and because I should have been doing something like this years ago instead of just writing checks to feel better about myself." Something flickered across Sarah's face. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition of raw honesty. Before Marcus could say anything else, Sophia walked over shyly and reached into the front pocket of her torn jeans. She pulled out a small, crumpled Burger King napkin and held it out to him. "I drew this for you last night," she said, suddenly bashful. Marcus unfolded it with the same care he'd use handling ancient documents. Sketched in faint pencil lines was a drawing of a tall man holding hands with a little girl and a baby. They were standing in front of a house with the word "home" written in crooked letters above the front door. He had to clear his throat twice before he could speak. "Sophia, you're an incredible artist." Her face lit up like the 4th of July. "I draw pictures whenever I get scared or sad. It makes me feel better." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. He folded the napkin drawing with the same care he'd use handling $1 million contract and slipped it into his jacket pocket like it was the most valuable thing he owned. "Keep drawing, Sophia." He stepped toward the door, his hand already on the brushed steel handle, when Sarah's voice stopped him cold. "Don't get too attached." He turned back. "To what?" "To us. You seem like a decent enough guy, but this life we're living, it's a sinking ship, and we're all going down with it." Marcus met her eyes directly. "I'm not here to be anyone's life preserver. I'm just here to walk alongside you for as long as you'll let me." She didn't respond to that. That night, Marcus returned to his glass penthouse overlooking the Detroit River. Motion sensor lights flickered on automatically, casting soft LED glows across granite countertops, polished hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a $1 million view of the Renaissance Center. It was stunning. It was pristine. It was completely empty. He poured himself 3 fingers of 18-year-old Macallan but never took a sip. Instead, he sank into his leather sectional, Sophia's drawing still warm in his pocket from his body heat. Somewhere just a few miles away, a little girl who'd promised to pay him back for baby formula was sleeping on clean hotel sheets for probably the first time in months. And Marcus Williams had never felt more truly alive. Morning came with a steady Michigan drizzle. By 8 a.m., Marcus was already pulling into the Hampton Inn parking lot, a bag of fresh Krispy Kreme donuts in one hand and a brand new Columbia winter jacket for Sophia in the other. But when he reached room 109, the door was standing wide open. The king bed was made with hospital corner precision. The toiletries sat untouched on the bathroom counter. The towels were folded and stacked like they'd never been used. They were gone. His stomach dropped like he'd just lost $100 million in the stock market. He stepped inside, checking the bathroom, the closet, even under the beds. Nothing. Not a trace they'd ever been there. He walked quickly to the front desk, where a bored-looking college kid was scrolling through TikTok. The family in room 109, where did they go? The clerk barely looked up. Lady came down around sunrise, said they couldn't stay after all. Left the keycard on the counter and walked out. Did she say why? Where they were headed? The kid shrugged. Didn't ask, man. Not my business. Marcus stepped back into the cold drizzle, his pulse hammering. He scanned the parking lot, the street, the McDonald's across 8 Mile Road. Nothing. They'd vanished like they'd never existed. Sophia hadn't wanted to leave. When Sarah shook her awake in the pre-dawn darkness, whispering urgently, Sophia had protested in her sleepy voice. "But Mom, it's so warm in here. And Mr. Williams said he'd come back today." "That's exactly why we can't stay," Sarah hissed, stuffing their few belongings back into garbage bags. "Nothing good ever comes from people with too much money to throw around. They always want something back eventually." Sophia obeyed. She'd learned long ago not to argue when Mom got that look in her eyes. They slipped out through the emergency stairwell, back into the cold Detroit morning, back toward uncertainty. Marcus spent the rest of that day driving through every neighborhood within 10 miles of the Hampton Inn. He stopped at homeless shelters, soup kitchens, even Hart Plaza downtown where he'd once handed out Thanksgiving meals during a corporate charity event. No one had seen them. That evening, he returned to the I-75 underpass. The concrete corner where they'd been living was swept clean by the rain, no cardboard, no blankets, no trace that a family had ever called this place home. He sat on the wet curb for over an hour, watching rainwater flow toward the storm drains. He'd known they might run. Hell, he'd half expected it. But not this fast. Not without even a goodbye. He pulled Sophia's napkin drawing from his wallet and unfolded it under a flickering streetlight. The pencil lines had smudged slightly from the dampness, but the image was still clear: a tall man, a little girl, a baby. The word "home" scrawled above them in crooked letters. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, long enough for the rain to soak through his Timberlands, long enough for his expensive jeans to get completely soaked. When he finally stood up, he whispered to the empty street. "Wherever you are, Sophia. I'm not giving up." Then he walked back to his Escalade, clutching the drawing like a promise he intended to keep. The next morning, Marcus didn't go to his downtown office. His assistant Rebecca called twice, once about a delayed merger meeting, once about some contract paperwork that needed his signature. Both calls went straight to voicemail. He wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or shareholder meetings. He was thinking about a little girl who'd promised to pay him back for baby formula, a girl with a 1-year-old brother and a mother who ran from kindness like it was toxic. Sophia's drawing now lived permanently in his wallet, carefully folded between his black card and a Starbucks rewards card he'd never bothered using. Every time he opened it, their faces were burned into his memory: Sophia, Isaiah, Sarah. Marcus drove through Detroit like a man possessed. He returned to the I-75 underpass first, scanning every shadow and corner for signs they'd come back. The rain had washed everything clean: no food wrappers, no baby bottles, not even footprints. By noon, he'd visited 4 different shelters. At the Cass Community Social Services building on 3rd Avenue, a brick building with a faded mural of smiling children, he finally caught a break. "Yeah, I remember them," said a tired-looking woman at the intake desk. "Little girl carrying a baby, maybe yesterday morning. Big brown eyes, dirty winter coat." Marcus leaned forward, his heart racing. Was there a woman with them? Early 30s, dark hair, seemed nervous. The intake worker nodded slowly. "Oh yeah, she was jumpy as hell. Kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following them. Said something about not trusting government people, grabbed some diapers and formula, then left real quick." "Did they mention where they were headed?" Marcus pressed, leaning across the intake desk. "No, sorry," the woman replied, "but I heard the little girl, Sophia, I think, asking about food banks near the Corktown area." Corktown. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a direction. Marcus thanked her and stepped back into the Detroit afternoon. By 3 p.m., he was cruising through the historic neighborhood, checking every alley, bus stop, and corner store. He ducked into a family-owned market on Michigan Avenue and bought a pack of Trident gum just to have an excuse to ask the elderly cashier if he'd seen a young girl carrying a baby. No luck. He was heading for the exit when something on the community bulletin board caught his eye. Tucked between ads for apartment rentals and handyman services was a small, handwritten note. Found, child's winter jacket. Pink with unicorns. Size 6X. Found near Roosevelt Park on Trumbull. If yours, please call, ***. He snapped a photo of the phone number and dialed immediately. Hello. A woman's voice answered on the third ring. Hi, I'm calling about the jacket you found, the one posted at Martinez Market. I think it might belong to a little girl I'm trying to help. There was a pause. You know this child? Her name's Sophia. She's about 8 years old, has a baby brother named Isaiah. Their mom is Sarah. The woman's voice softened instantly. Oh honey, yes, I saw them 3 nights ago. They were sitting outside the spin cycle laundromat next to that new taco truck. Poor little thing dropped her jacket when they got up to leave. Marcus's heart rate spiked. Do you have any idea which direction they went? I think they were walking toward Belle Isle. That's the last I saw of them. Thank you so much. Did they look okay? I pray to God they are, sweetheart. Marcus drove straight to Belle Isle State Park as the sun painted the Detroit River in shades of gold and orange. The island park was nearly empty, just a few joggers and an elderly man feeding ducks by the water. He parked near the aquarium and started walking the perimeter, scanning every bench and pavilion. Then he heard it. Not crying or shouting, but singing, a soft, barely audible lullaby drifting across the evening air. He followed the sound toward the far end of the island, near the old lighthouse. Behind a cluster of oak trees, he spotted a small figure hunched on the ground, rocking gently back and forth. Sophia, he called out softly. She went rigid, then slowly turned around. Isaiah was nestled in her lap, blinking up at the fading daylight. Mr. Williams, she breathed, disbelief written across her thin face. You really found us. She looked smaller than before, more fragile. Her lips were chapped from the cold, but she still managed that brave little smile that had haunted his dreams. I told Mum you'd keep looking for us, she said quietly, but she got scared. She said rich people don't help without expecting something back. Marcus crouched down beside them, his designer shoes sinking into the damp grass. Where is your mom, sweetheart? Sophia shook her head. She went to find medicine for Isaiah at the free clinic on Jefferson Avenue. Told me to wait right here. That was this morning. How long have you been by yourself? She shrugged, that heartbreaking gesture that said too much. Since the sun came up. Marcus looked around. The temperature was dropping fast, and storm clouds were building over the river. Come on, he said firmly. You're not spending another night outside. But what if Mom comes back and can't find us? We'll leave her a note with my phone number. But right now, you and Isaiah need food, warmth, and safety. That's what any good mother would want. Sophia looked down at her baby brother, whose lips had a slight blue tinge from the cold. Finally, she nodded. Okay, Mr. Williams. He lifted Isaiah carefully, surprised by how light the baby felt in his arms. Sophia walked beside him in silence, her small hand gripping the edge of his jacket like a lifeline. This time, he didn't take them to a hotel. He took them home. The penthouse. The private elevator opened directly into Marcus's downtown penthouse with a soft chime. Sophia stepped cautiously onto the polished marble floors, her eyes growing wide as she took in the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Detroit skyline, the modern art on the walls, the kitchen that belonged in Architectural Digest. This is where you live, she whispered. Yes, Marcus said simply. And for now, it's where you'll be living too. She stared at the massive leather sectional, the 75-inch Samsung TV, the framed photograph of Marcus with a beautiful woman, his late wife Jennifer at their wedding in Napa Valley. Do you have bedrooms here? 3 of them, Marcus replied. And you're getting the one with the best view of the river. Sophia's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I've never had my own bedroom before. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Well, it's about time you did. He laid Isaiah gently on the sofa, tucking a cashmere throw around the sleeping baby. Then he turned to face Sophia, who was standing in the middle of his living room like she'd just stepped into another universe. We're going to figure this out together, he said. You, me, and your mom when we find her. But it starts with this: tonight, you are completely safe. For the first time since he'd known her, Sophia let herself cry, not the panicked sobs of desperation, but quiet tears of relief and gratitude. Outside the windows, Detroit came alive with headlights and neon signs. But inside the penthouse, a door had finally opened wide enough to let hope walk through. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his leather recliner by the window, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. The penthouse hummed quietly with central air and the soft sounds of two children finally sleeping in warmth and safety. But Sarah was still out there somewhere in the cold Detroit night. And Marcus knew this was just the beginning of their story. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's face, guarded, fierce, carrying the weight of too many broken promises. He was certain she'd planned to return to Belle Isle that afternoon, but night had fallen hours ago. The sun had long since disappeared behind the Renaissance Center skyline. The police incident reports on his MacBook offered nothing useful. No arrests matching her description. No hospital admissions. No emergency room visits. Just deafening silence. At 3 a.m., desperation drove him to call an old friend, Detective Ray Martinez, recently retired from Detroit PD, who now ran a private investigation company out of Dearborn. Ray, it's Marcus Williams. A groggy voice answered. Marcus? You calling me at 3 in the morning means either someone's dead or someone's about to be. Not yet. But I'm terrified someone might be if I don't find them soon. Ray's tone sharpened immediately. Talk to me. I need you to locate a woman. Name's Sarah, early 30s, thin build, shoulder-length brown hair. She's struggling with mental health issues and was looking for medication for her 1-year-old son. She's been living on the streets. A pause. And this woman matters to you because she matters to an 8-year-old girl who's sleeping in my guest bedroom right now. Ray let out a low whistle. Damn, Marcus. Alright, I'll have my team start canvassing at sunrise. Thank you. Whatever it costs. Don't worry about money. I'll call you the minute we have something. When Marcus finally dozed off, it was almost dawn. He woke to the smell of toasted Wonder Bread and the gentle clink of dishes. Following the sounds to his granite kitchen, he found Sophia standing on a step stool, carefully monitoring the toaster like she was conducting a symphony. She turned when she heard his footsteps. Good morning, Mr. Williams. Morning, sweetheart, he said, rubbing his eyes. You didn't need to make breakfast. She shrugged, that same gesture that broke his heart every time. Mom always says if somebody gives you a roof over your head, you better give them every reason not to regret it. Marcus smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in days. Well then, this toast is definitely a good reason. They sat together at the kitchen island, Marcus with his black coffee, Sophia with fresh orange juice, baby Isaiah cooing happily in the high-end bouncer seat Marcus had ordered on Amazon Prime at 4 a.m. and had delivered before sunrise. He kept the conversation light, asking about her favorite Disney princess, whether she liked dogs or cats better, if she'd ever been to a Tigers game at Comerica Park. She answered cautiously at first, then with growing comfort. By the time she was telling him about a stuffed elephant she'd once rescued from a dumpster and named Mr. Peanuts, Marcus was actually laughing. But the moment he gently asked about Sarah, Sophia's shoulders tensed up. She always comes back, Sophia said quietly, staring into her juice. She promised. Do you remember exactly where she was going yesterday? The free clinic on Cass Avenue. But... Sophia's voice trailed off. I don't think she made it there. What makes you say that? Sophia looked down at her hands. Sometimes she gets stuck. Her brain starts racing and she can't catch her breath. Then she runs away until it stops. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Has this happened before? Sophia nodded slowly. Last winter, she disappeared for 3 whole days. When she came back, she had scratches all over her arms. Said she'd been fighting the monsters in her head. Marcus reached over and gently covered her small hand with his. I've got a good friend helping me look for her. His name's Ray, and he used to be a police officer. We're going to find your mom. She blinked hard but kept her voice steady. You promise? I promise. Later that morning, Ray called with news. Marcus, we might have something. A woman matching Sarah's description was spotted around midnight near the abandoned Rite Aid on Woodward Avenue. She was barefoot, seemed disoriented, asking people if they had children's Tylenol. Marcus started pacing his living room. Did anyone help her? A 7-Eleven clerk got worried and called for a wellness check. But by the time EMTs arrived, she'd vanished. Where would she go next? Ray was quiet for a moment. If she's scared and avoiding hospitals, she's probably heading somewhere that feels safe to her. Maybe an old shelter, or someplace with positive memories. Marcus thought back to his conversations with Sophia. Check the area behind New Bethel Baptist Church on Grand River Avenue. Sophia mentioned they used to sit there on Sunday mornings because Sarah loved listening to the gospel choir through the windows. I'll send someone immediately. An hour later, Ray called back. We found her. Marcus's heart stopped. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Mentally, she's in rough shape. She was sitting behind the church, crying, clutching a broken baby bottle. Wouldn't talk to any of my guys. Where is she now? We managed to convince her to come to Hope Recovery Center. It's a private facility my wife runs for trauma cases. Sarah's resting there now, but she's still pretty fragile. I'm on my way. Hope Recovery Center was tucked discreetly between a flower shop and a Starbucks on Jefferson Avenue. Inside, Marcus found Sarah curled up on a beige sofa, wrapped in a donated blanket, her shoes placed neatly beside her feet. She looked up as he entered, and for a terrifying moment, her eyes were completely blank, like she didn't recognize him at all. Then awareness flooded back, and panic followed immediately. Where's Sophia? Where's my baby? They're safe, Marcus said gently, staying by the doorway to give her space. They're at my apartment, warm and fed. Isaiah's been sleeping peacefully. Her body sagged with pure relief, but then the panic rushed back like a tidal wave. I didn't mean to abandon her. I was trying to find medication. Isaiah had this terrible cough, and I didn't have money for the pharmacy. I got lost. I know, Marcus said gently, keeping his voice calm and non-threatening. You don't need to explain anything. You were doing everything you could for your kids. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. I didn't think you'd still be looking for us. I thought you'd given up by now. I promised Sophia I would find you. Sarah stared down at her trembling hands. Why do you even care? Why are you doing all this for people you barely know? Marcus settled into the chair across from her. Because I have the resources to help. And because I believe people deserve more than just surviving day to day, they deserve a real chance at living. She nodded slowly, the tears still flowing. I want to get better, I really do. But I'm terrified I'll mess this up somehow. You probably will, Marcus said, and her head snapped up in surprise. We all screw things up. That doesn't mean you don't deserve another shot at getting it right. Sarah let out a laugh that was half sob, half relief. You're not what I expected from a billionaire. Marcus smiled. You're not what I expected either. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Then Marcus said, "Come home with me." Sarah stared at him. "To your penthouse. For now. Until we figure out the next steps together. You have a daughter who's been worried sick, and a son who slept through the entire night for the first time in weeks." She hesitated, anxiety flickering across her face. Then, finally, she nodded. And for the second time in 3 days, Marcus Williams brought a piece of the broken world into his arms and carried it home. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and Sarah stepped cautiously into Marcus's penthouse like someone crossing the threshold into another dimension. Her clothes were different, clean scrubs donated by the recovery center, but she still moved with the wariness of someone expecting the floor to disappear beneath her feet. Sophia spotted her first. "Mom," she cried, bolting from the hallway where she'd been coloring, her bare feet slapping against the polished hardwood. Sarah dropped her small bag and dropped to her knees just as Sophia crashed into her arms. They held each other fiercely, and for that perfect moment, nothing else in the world existed. Just mother and daughter, clinging together like two pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "I was so scared," Sophia whispered against Sarah's neck. "I thought something really bad happened to you." "I'm here now, baby girl," Sarah murmured, rocking her gently. "I didn't mean to disappear. My brain just got too loud, and I couldn't think straight." Marcus stood quietly by the kitchen island, giving them the space they needed. He felt something deep in his chest crack open as he watched them, something that had been sealed shut and gathering dust for 10 years. When Isaiah stirred from his afternoon nap and started fussing, Sarah immediately rushed to him. She scooped him up and held him tight against her chest, like he was her anchor to reality. "I forgot how much heavier he's gotten," she said with a bittersweet smile. "That means he's been eating well," Marcus said. 3 meals a day, plus snacks when Sophia convinces me he needs them." Sophia grinned proudly. "I told Mr. Williams that Isaiah loves mashed bananas and Cheerios. We even got him a proper high chair from Bye Bye Baby," Marcus added. Sarah looked around the penthouse with fresh eyes, the gleaming granite surfaces, the soft ambient lighting, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Detroit River. She was still on edge, but having her children in her arms seemed to ground her. Marcus gestured toward the dining table, where he'd set out lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches, Campbell's tomato soup, and sliced Honeycrisp apples, the kind of comfort food he hadn't attempted since his college days. He'd burned the first batch of sandwiches and oversalted the soup, but round 2 had turned out decent. "It's nothing fancy," he said, "but it's warm." Sophia's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "We never get to sit at a real dining table anymore." "Not since we lost Grandma Rose's house," Sarah said quietly, helping Sophia into her chair and settling Isaiah in his high chair. Marcus poured 3 glasses of ice water and joined them. They ate mostly in silence, the good kind of quiet that feels like healing instead of emptiness. Halfway through the meal, Sarah looked up. "This isn't going to be permanent, right?" Marcus nodded. "Just until you're ready for the next step. I want you to have control over your own life." "Good. Because I need to earn my way. I don't want to be anyone's charity project." "I completely understand. I've already started researching transitional housing programs, safe places with real support services and job training programs." Sarah nodded slowly. "That would mean everything." After lunch, Sophia convinced Marcus to help her build an epic blanket fort in the living room. They spent nearly an hour engineering it using sofa cushions, throw pillows, and several of Marcus's expensive Ralph Lauren sheets, which he donated to the cause without a second thought. Inside their makeshift fortress, Sophia curled up next to Isaiah, who was now wide awake and kicking his feet happily at the soft lighting filtering through the blankets. Sarah watched from the leather armchair, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen crossing her face. He brought her a steaming mug of chamomile tea and settled across from her in the matching chair. "I'd forgotten how peaceful a real home can feel," she said softly. Marcus nodded. "Peace is underrated. She sipped the tea, then studied his face. "You've lost someone important." He didn't try to deflect. "My wife Jennifer. 10 years ago. Ovarian cancer." Sarah's expression softened with genuine empathy. "I'm so sorry. I kept this place exactly the way it was when she died. Same furniture, same books on the shelves, even her coffee mug still in the cabinet. I never really figured out how to move forward." "Why not?" Marcus stared into his tea. "I think I convinced myself that if I kept everything frozen in time, she wouldn't really be gone." Sarah nodded slowly. "That kind of silence. I know it too. You miss their voice. Their laugh. The way the whole room felt different when they walked into it." They sat quietly for several minutes, sipping tea and listening to Sophia's gentle chatter with her baby brother. "You could have walked away after buying Sophia that formula," Sarah said, studying his face. "You could have felt good about yourself and gone back to your life. But you didn't." "Why?" Marcus thought for a long moment before answering. "Because everyone keeps telling me that money fixes everything. And it doesn't. But showing up, listening, sharing a meal or a moment, that still matters. And maybe I needed that reminder as much as you needed the help." Sarah blinked rapidly, then looked away toward the Detroit River sparkling beyond the windows. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Letting people in. Trusting anyone. You don't have to figure it all out at once," Marcus said gently. "Just start where you are." That night after dinner, Sophia drew again, this time at the glass coffee table, using a brand new set of Crayola-colored pencils Marcus had ordered from Amazon earlier that day. She drew a house with 4 stick figures, a tall man, a woman, a little girl, and a baby. Above them, she wrote one word in big block letters: family. She handed the drawing to Marcus before bedtime. "This one's even better than my first one." He held it carefully, like it might dissolve if he breathed too hard. "It's perfect, Sophia." Sarah tucked Isaiah into the portable crib in the guest bedroom, then stood in the hallway watching Sophia brush her teeth at the bathroom mirror with a brand new Frozen-themed toothbrush. "She's different already," Sarah said quietly to Marcus. "She feels safe," he replied. Sarah glanced at him. "I want to be the kind of mother she deserves. Not just someone barely surviving day to day. You're already so much more than that." They stood there for another moment, listening to Sophia humming, "Let It Go," while she finished brushing. Then Sarah whispered, "I still don't know if I can trust this." "Trust you? I don't expect you to," Marcus said honestly. "But I'll keep showing up anyway." She nodded, then disappeared into the guest room. Marcus was left alone in the living room again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. There were goldfish cracker crumbs on the table, a purple crayon under the couch, and the echo of genuine laughter still floating down the hallway. For the first time in 10 years, Marcus Williams's home felt like it was breathing, alive. And he realized this wasn't just about helping them find a home. Maybe it was about him finding one too. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows in golden sheets, casting warm light across the penthouse. Marcus woke not to silence, but to the smell of scrambled eggs and the soft sound of someone humming a gospel song. It took him a moment to realize it wasn't a dream. He walked into the kitchen barefoot, running his fingers through his hair. There was Sarah at the Viking stove with her back turned, hair pulled up in a messy bun, wearing one of his oversized University of Michigan hoodies. Sophia sat at the kitchen island, legs swinging, carefully feeding Isaiah tiny spoonfuls of mashed bananas from a Gerber jar. "Morning," Marcus said, his voice still rough from sleep. Sarah turned and offered a small but genuine smile. "Thought we'd let you sleep in. You looked like you needed it." Sophia waved enthusiastically. "Mom made eggs the way Great-Grandma Ruby used to, a little burnt around the edges." Marcus chuckled and reached for a coffee mug. "Sounds absolutely perfect." They ate together again, no formal ceremony, just warmth. Sarah's hands were steadier today, her eyes less haunted. Marcus noticed she'd showered, and there was actual color in her cheeks instead of that gray pallor of exhaustion. He could see something fragile but real taking root, hope. After breakfast, Marcus pulled out a manila folder from his leather briefcase and slid it across to Sarah. "What's this?" she asked. "Some options I researched," he said. "Transitional housing programs here in Detroit. Good ones with counseling services, job placement assistance, and on-site childcare." Sarah opened the folder slowly, scanning the printed pages. "These all look expensive." "They are," he admitted. "But I'll cover the costs, at least for the first year." She set the folder down, her jaw tightening. "You can't keep doing this, Marcus." "I can. And I will, until you tell me to stop." Her hands clenched into fists. "I don't want Sophia growing up thinking people like you are fairy tale characters. That someone will always swoop in to save her." "She won't think that," Marcus said firmly. "Because she's already saving herself. Every single day she chooses to stay kind in a world that's tried to break her. That's real strength, not fantasy." Sarah looked away, swallowing hard. "I still don't know how to be part of anything." "You're already part of something," he said softly. "This. Right here. Right now." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus checked the security peephole and opened it cautiously. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a charcoal gray suit stood in the hallway, Detective Ray Martinez. "Ray," Marcus said, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you today." Ray stepped inside and nodded respectfully toward Sarah. "Just thought I'd check in, make sure everyone's settling in okay." Sarah stiffened immediately. "You're a cop." "Was a cop," Ray said, holding up both hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to ask questions or cause problems. I'm here because I know what it looks like when good people fall through the cracks." Sophia peered out from behind her mother, still holding Isaiah on her hip. Ray crouched down to her eye level. "Hey there, kiddo. You're braver than most adults I know." Sophia smiled shyly. Ray straightened up and turned back to Marcus, his expression growing serious. "Listen, I got some concerning information this morning. Some community outreach volunteer reported a man asking questions about Sarah and the kids," Ray said, his voice tight with concern. Marcus's brow furrowed. "Who was asking?" "Didn't leave a name. Just said he was looking for a woman with a baby and a little girl. Mentioned something about settling debts." Sarah went white as a sheet. "Oh God." Marcus looked at her sharply. "Sarah? What is it?" She closed her eyes, her hands trembling. "His name's Deshaun. Isaiah's biological father. He's been in and out of Wayne County Jail for years. When I got pregnant, he disappeared completely. But after Isaiah was born, he showed up again, angrier, more dangerous. Said if I didn't pay him back for his trouble, he'd take the baby and I'd never see him again." Marcus felt his jaw clench. "He threatened to kidnap your son. Multiple times. I kept moving around Detroit, staying in different shelters, sleeping under different overpasses. I thought maybe he'd finally given up on us." Ray's voice was firm and authoritative. "If he's actively searching for you, we need to file paperwork immediately. Restraining order, at minimum. Get this guy on the legal record." Sarah nodded shakily. "Okay. But I don't want Sophia to be scared. She's already been through too much." Marcus knelt down beside Sophia, who was quietly playing with Isaiah on the carpet but had clearly heard every word. "Did you understand what we were talking about, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Sophia nodded slowly, her big brown eyes serious beyond her years. "It's completely normal to feel scared," Marcus said softly. "But you're safe here in this apartment. And we're going to do everything we can to keep it that way." She grabbed onto his sleeve with both small hands. You promise? Marcus looked directly into her eyes. I promise. That afternoon, Sarah and Ray drove to the Detroit Police Department's downtown precinct to file the restraining order paperwork. Marcus stayed behind with both kids, keeping things as normal as possible. They built another blanket fort in the living room. Watched old Disney movies on Netflix. Marcus even managed to make perfect grilled cheese sandwiches this time without burning a single one. But his mind kept circling back to the same dark thought: safety wasn't just about warm beds and full stomachs. It was about protection from the demons that followed people out of their past. And Sarah's demons had just announced they were coming to collect. When Sarah returned 3 hours later, she looked exhausted but relieved. It's done, she said, sinking onto the sofa. They'll process it first thing tomorrow morning. Marcus nodded. You did exactly the right thing. That night, after Sophia was tucked into bed, Sarah and Marcus sat on the penthouse balcony overlooking the glittering Detroit skyline. The Renaissance Center towers blinked with office lights, and the Detroit River reflected the city's glow like scattered diamonds. I used to think being strong meant staying invisible, Sarah said quietly, nursing a cup of herbal tea. Keeping your head down, never asking for help from anybody. What do you think now? Marcus asked. That maybe real strength is letting someone see you when you're completely broken, and trusting them not to use it against you. Marcus didn't interrupt, just listened. I used to sleep with one arm wrapped around Sophia and one hand gripping a broken bottle, she continued. I was always ready to fight, even when there was nothing left worth protecting. You're not living in that world anymore, Marcus said firmly. But what if it follows me here, she whispered. Then we face it together. She turned to look at him. You're not afraid. I'm terrified of failing you, he admitted. And Sophia. And Isaiah. But I'm not backing down. Sarah reached over and placed her hand over his, not romantically, but as recognition. Trust. The quiet beginning of something healing. You're not failing anyone, she said softly. For the first time in years, Marcus actually believed it. Even with the threat looming. Even with the past clawing at their doorstep. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding something beautiful from the wreckage. Together. The next morning, Marcus woke before dawn. The sun hadn't yet broken through the Detroit skyline, and the penthouse was wrapped in comfortable silence. He padded quietly to the kitchen, brewed a pot of strong Starbucks coffee, and watched dark storm clouds roll in from over Lake Huron. There was a storm coming, literally and figuratively. Thunder rumbled in the distance like a warning. Sarah joined him 20 minutes later, wearing an oversized Michigan State sweatshirt he'd bought her, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked stronger today, less like a ghost, more like the fierce mother Sophia had described in her drawings. Coffee? Marcus offered. She nodded. Please. Make it strong. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, sipping from matching Starbucks mugs and watching the sky shift from charcoal black to deep gray. Neither mentioned Deshawn's name, but he was there between them, in the silence, in the tension, in the air itself. Marcus finally broke the quiet. Ray's contact at the precinct called me last night. The restraining order goes active at noon today. That's something, at least, Sarah said. But it doesn't actually stop someone like Deshawn from showing up anyway, Marcus acknowledged. No, Sarah agreed. But it gives us legal ground to stand on if he does. She stared into her coffee. He's not like most men, Marcus. He doesn't care about rules or consequences. Marcus reached across the small table, resting his hand lightly over hers. If he comes near you or these kids, he'll have to go through me first. And I don't care what kind of man he thinks he is. Sarah gave him a tight smile. You talk like someone who's never been punched in the face. Do hostile corporate takeovers count? She laughed, A real one this time, light and genuine. It was the sound of someone remembering how. Later that morning, Sarah and Sophia went to the nearby Detroit Community Center where Marcus had arranged for them to meet with Dr. Angela Martinez, a trauma counselor who specialized in helping families affected by domestic violence. Marcus stayed home with Isaiah, who was teething and needed constant attention. While the baby gnawed on a frozen teething ring from CVS, Marcus tried to focus on emails and conference calls, attempting to maintain some semblance of normal business life. But every few minutes, he found himself glancing toward the elevator, waiting for it to bring his new family home. Then, just before noon, the building's security desk buzzed his apartment. His blood ran cold. "Mr. Williams," the voice crackled through the intercom. "There's a man downstairs asking for Sarah. Says he's her husband. Should we send him up?" Marcus's blood went ice cold. "Hold him in the lobby," he said firmly. "Do not let him leave the building. I'm on my way down." He grabbed his jacket and raced to the private elevator. His mind was already racing ahead, building scenarios, exit strategies, calculating every possible outcome like he was preparing for the most important business negotiation of his life. When the elevator doors opened to the marble lobby, Marcus stepped out and immediately spotted him. Deshaun stood by the main entrance, hands tucked deep in his Detroit Lions hoodie, eyes scanning the upscale lobby like a predator sizing up his territory. He was tall and wiry, with a cold smirk that never reached his eyes. Marcus walked straight toward him. "You're trespassing on private property." Deshaun looked him up and down slowly, taking in the expensive clothes and confident posture. "You must be the new sugar daddy." "I'm the man who's going to make sure you don't get anywhere near Sarah or those children," Marcus said evenly. Deshaun snorted. "I just want to talk to my baby mother. That's all." "You lost that right the day you threatened to kidnap your own son." Marcus noticed two security guards moving closer, sensing the escalating tension. "Look, I'm not here to start trouble," Deshaun said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I just want what belongs to me." "They don't belong to anyone," Marcus snapped, his voice hardening. "They're not property, and if you take one step toward that elevator, I'll make sure you leave here in handcuffs." Deshaun's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think your money makes you bulletproof, rich boy?" "No," Marcus said with deadly calm, "but it makes me very hard to ignore. And I've got more than enough resources to keep you out of their lives permanently." For a long beat, Deshaun didn't move. Then he laughed, sharp and bitter. "So you're playing the white knight, huh? Big shot businessman saving the poor little ghetto family." "I'm not playing anything," Marcus said. "I'm standing between a threat and the people I care about. You should walk away now, before you give me a reason to make this much worse for you." Deshaun stared him down for another tense moment. Then, with an exaggerated shrug, he turned and started walking toward the glass doors. "Tell her this ain't over," he called over his shoulder. "Not by a long shot." Marcus watched him disappear down the sidewalk before turning to the head security guard. "I want a complete incident report filed. Archive all camera footage from the last hour. If he shows up here again, call Detroit PD immediately, don't even bother calling me first." Back in the penthouse, Marcus barely had time to collect himself before the elevator chimed again. Sarah and Sophia stepped out, their cheeks flushed from the cold Michigan air. Sophia was carrying a paper butterfly she'd made at the community center. Sarah took one look at Marcus's face and stopped short. "What happened?" "He came," Marcus said quietly. "Downstairs. Said he wanted to talk to you." Sarah went white as a ghost. "Did Sophia see him?" "She never knew he was here." "You're both safe." "He's gone now." Sarah collapsed onto the leather sofa, her hands visibly shaking. "He always does this. Disappears for months or years, then shows up like some kind of nightmare that won't end." "He's not getting near you again," Marcus said firmly. "Not while I'm here." She looked at him with a mixture of deep gratitude and crushing guilt. You didn't sign up for this kind of drama. I didn't have to sign up for anything, he replied. I chose this. I chose you. All of you. Sophia climbed into her mother's lap, proudly showing off her butterfly craft. Look, Mom. Ms. Martinez said butterflies mean new beginnings. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair gently. It's absolutely beautiful, sweetheart. Marcus watched them, feeling his chest tighten with emotion. He'd survived hostile corporate takeovers, billion-dollar mergers, and economic recessions. But nothing in his entire career had ever mattered as much as this, keeping this fragile family from being torn apart. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the storm clouds finally broke open and rain began falling in steady sheets across Detroit. Inside, Marcus pulled Sophia's drawing from his wallet, the one with the stick figures under the word family, and placed it carefully on the kitchen counter where they could all see it. Because in the face of threats, fear, and storms from the past, the most powerful thing they could do was keep building their future together. The rain continued throughout the night, drumming steadily against the penthouse windows. Inside, the atmosphere felt fragile, like everyone was holding their breath. Marcus made spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, and Sophia insisted on helping, tossing pasta with more enthusiasm than technique. Her laughter, bright and innocent, was the only thing that seemed untouched by the storm that had crashed back into their lives. Sarah barely touched her food. She sat at the dining table with her fork in hand, but her eyes were distant, like part of her was there and part of her was somewhere else entirely. Marcus noticed how she flinched at unexpected sounds, the dishwasher starting, Isaiah dropping his spoon, and how her fingers stayed curled around the edge of her plate, as if she was bracing for impact. After Sophia and Isaiah were both asleep, Marcus found Sarah standing at the main window, arms folded tightly across her chest, staring out at the city lights below. She didn't turn when he approached. I can't breathe when I think about him, she said softly. I keep imagining him grabbing Sophia, or hurting Isaiah, or coming after you because of me. He won't get the chance, Marcus said firmly. Security's been doubled. Ray's got eyes on every entrance. We're completely protected, Marcus said firmly. Sarah shook her head. No lock or camera can stop a man like Deshaun if he really wants something. He doesn't care about rules or consequences. Marcus stepped closer beside her at the window. Then we give him something else to be afraid of. She looked at him sharply. You're talking like someone who's never been truly scared. I've been terrified plenty of times, Marcus replied. But never of doing what's right. Sarah's voice cracked. But what if I'm the one who destroys this? I've ruined everything good that's ever happened to me. Marcus reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You didn't ruin anything, Sarah. You survived hell and kept your children alive when the whole world gave up on you. That's not failure, that's incredible strength. She turned to face him, tears brimming in her eyes. Why do you care so much about us? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I see who you really are. Not just the scars or the painful history. I see the mother who walked miles in a snowstorm to get formula for her baby. The woman who never stopped fighting for her kids when everyone else would have given up. I care because your courage reminds me of the kind of man I want to be. She exhaled shakily and leaned into him for just a moment, just long enough to steady herself. The next day, Marcus drove Sarah and Sophia to a group therapy session at the Detroit Community Center. Sarah had agreed reluctantly, but Marcus knew healing wasn't a solo journey. It needed witnesses, support, and sometimes mirrors to show you how far you'd come. While they were gone, Marcus took Isaiah to Belle Isle Park, the baby bundled snugly in a weatherproof carrier. The Michigan sky was finally clear after days of storms, the air crisp and clean. He sat on a bench near the playground, watching other parents push children on swings and chase them through piles of wet autumn leaves. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached, smiling at Isaiah. "First baby?" she asked. Marcus nodded, even though it wasn't exactly the whole truth. "Sort of." She chuckled warmly. "They change everything, don't they?" "Yeah," Marcus said, gently bouncing Isaiah. "They really do." She sat beside him on the bench. "I raised 3 boys, lost one in Afghanistan. The other 2 still call me every Sunday without fail. Children grow up, but the worry never stops." Marcus glanced at her. "Does the fear ever go away?" She looked at him with understanding eyes. "No, honey. But the love gets so much louder that the fear starts to matter less." That wisdom stayed with him all afternoon. Later that evening, Sarah returned from her therapy session quieter but somehow lighter. She didn't share details, but Marcus noticed how her posture had changed, still cautious, but less like she was carrying the weight of the world. Sophia made hot chocolate for everyone, insisting on extra marshmallows and whipped cream. "It's like a fancy coffee shop," she announced proudly. That night, while Sarah gave Isaiah his bath and Sophia worked on homework at the dining table, Marcus sat in his home office with Ray on speakerphone. "I've got an update," Ray said. "We've been tracking Deshaun since his little visit. He's been asking around downtown shelters, seems to be staying at a flophouse near Easter Market." "Is he armed?" "No confirmation yet, but his criminal record isn't exactly clean." "You want me to reach out to the prosecutor's office?" Marcus hesitated. "No, not yet. I don't want to drag Sarah through a court battle unless we absolutely have to." Ray sighed. "Then we wait and stay ready." Marcus hung up and returned to the living room. Sophia had fallen asleep on the couch, her head resting against a throw pillow, colored pencils still scattered around her. Sarah sat cross-legged on the carpet, gently rocking Isaiah, who had finally settled down after a fussy hour. "I heard from Ray," Marcus said quietly. She didn't look up from the baby. "And?" "He's keeping tabs on Deshaun. We're safe for now." Sarah nodded. "Thank you." Marcus hesitated before asking, "Sarah, have you ever thought about what comes next? Not running or hiding, but actually building something permanent?" "I used to dream about that," she said softly. "But I don't even know what that would look like anymore." He crouched down beside her. "Maybe it's not about a specific place. Maybe it's about deciding to stop running and start building something new." She looked up at him. "With you?" "With whoever you choose," Marcus said honestly. "But I'll be here for as long as you need me." She smiled faintly, brushing Isaiah's soft curls. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "Good," he said. "Because you deserve so much better than what you've had." Outside the penthouse windows, the rain had finally stopped. Detroit shimmered with reflected lights in the puddles below. Inside, for the first time in years, Sarah leaned back against the couch, took a deep breath, and said 3 words she hadn't spoken in forever. "I feel safe." And for Marcus, that was worth more than every deal he'd ever closed, every Fortune 500 ranking he'd ever achieved. Because real safety, the kind that lets you sleep peacefully and dream about tomorrow, was precious and rare. And now it was theirs. The days that followed settled into something Marcus had never experienced before, the beautiful chaos of family life. He found himself adapting to children in his pristine penthouse with surprising ease. He no longer jumped when Isaiah's bottle hit the hardwood floor or when the baby's cries echoed through the hallways at 3 a.m. There was something grounding about their presence, something authentically real that his sterile bachelor life had been missing. Sarah began to emerge from the protective shell she'd worn like armor for years. She took longer walks around downtown Detroit with Sophia, even signed up for a cooking class at the community center. Marcus helped Sarah apply for a position at Common Ground Cafe, a nonprofit in downtown Detroit that specifically hired single mothers. When she got the interview, they celebrated with dollar store cupcakes that Sophia decorated with rainbow sprinkles and way too much frosting. Each day felt like a small victory, a step back from the edge, a step closer to solid ground. But evenings brought a different kind of quiet, one that hummed with unspoken questions and the fear Sarah could never quite shake. Marcus noticed how she checked the door locks twice before bed, how she kept her iPhone charged and within arm's reach, how she still flinched at unexpected sounds. And then one evening, just after dinner, the sound came. A soft knock at the door. 3 measured taps. Polite. Calculated. Marcus was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher when he froze. Sarah, who had been reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to Sophia on the couch, looked up sharply. Their eyes met across the room. Another knock. Firmer this time. Marcus dried his hands and stepped to the intercom system. He pressed the button. Yes. A gravelly voice came through the speaker. Delivery for Sarah Williams. Marcus's brow furrowed. We didn't order anything. There was a pause. Then, barely audible, maybe she didn't. Marcus's blood went ice cold. He muted the speaker and turned to Sarah. Take the kids to the bedroom. Lock the door. Now. Sarah scooped Isaiah from his bouncer, grabbed Sophia's hand, and rushed down the hallway without question. Marcus turned back to the intercom. Leave it at the front desk, he said firmly. I'll pick it up later. But when he checked the security camera feed on his iPad, there was no delivery driver. No uniform. Just a figure in a dark hoodie standing by the elevator, back turned to the camera like he knew exactly where it was. Marcus called Ray immediately. He's here. You're certain? No delivery, and he used a name he shouldn't know. Sarah never took my last name. I'm sending a patrol unit to your building right now. Stay put and don't open that door for anyone but me. Marcus hung up and engaged the deadbolt. He went to his study, opened the desk drawer, and pulled out the pepper spray and tactical flashlight he'd reluctantly purchased the week before. He hated the idea of weapons, but he hated feeling helpless even more. From down the hallway, he could hear Sophia's soft voice whispering to her mother, and Isaiah fussing again. The air felt heavy, electric, like those moments before a Michigan thunderstorm breaks open. 20 minutes later, a knock came with an authoritative voice, Mr. Williams, Detroit PD. Marcus opened the door cautiously. A uniformed officer stood beside Ray, whose face was grim. We didn't catch him, Ray said. Guy slipped out through the service elevator before building security could corner him. Marcus's jaw clenched. He knew Sarah's full name. Ray nodded grimly. He's escalating. This was psychological warfare. The officer took statements while Ray walked the perimeter of the penthouse, checking every access point and reviewing security footage. When they finished, Marcus stood with Ray in the hallway outside the apartment. We need to consider relocation, Ray said. At least temporarily. He's hunting now, and you saw how easily he got this close. Marcus exhaled heavily. She just started feeling safe here. If we move her again, it's another crack in her foundation. Ray put a hand on his shoulder. And if we don't, it could be a break she doesn't recover from. Marcus returned inside and found Sarah still in the bedroom with both children, her face pale but composed. He's gone, Marcus said softly. But we need to discuss next steps. Sarah stood slowly, rocking Isaiah in her arms. He won't stop. I know Deshaun, this is just the beginning. Ray thinks we should relocate you. Somewhere safe where he can't track you down. Sarah shook her head. I'm so tired of running, Marcus. I know, he said gently. But it's not just about you anymore. Sophia looked up with wide, worried eyes. Are we leaving again? Marcus knelt beside her. Not forever, sweetheart. Just until it's completely safe. Will there be a kitchen where I can make you breakfast? He smiled despite everything. A real kitchen. And I promise we'll bring all your art supplies. Sarah looked around the penthouse, the place that had become more than shelter. It had been hope, family, home. But survival sometimes meant sacrifice. She nodded. Okay. Let's do it. They moved the next day. Ray arranged for a safe house in Grosse Pointe. Gated, discreet, and monitored around the clock. Marcus paid 6 months in advance, no questions asked. The house was modest but clean, with a sunny front porch and a fenced backyard where Sophia could play safely. Marcus stayed for the first few nights, sleeping on the living room sofa, helping them settle in. Sarah took to planting small herb gardens by the kitchen windowsill, basil, mint, rosemary. Sophia arranged her books in neat rows under her new bed. Isaiah seemed blissfully unaware of the changes, as long as someone held him when he cried. On the third night, Sarah sat on the front porch while Marcus repaired a loose screen door. The stars were visible here, away from Detroit city lights. I thought when I left him that first time, that was the end, Sarah said quietly. But leaving isn't the same as escaping. Sometimes it just delays the reckoning. Marcus nodded. But this time you're not facing it alone. That changes everything. She looked at him. Do you ever regret it? Taking us in? He leaned against the porch railing. Never. Even now. Even with all this chaos. Especially now. She smiled, small but genuine. You saved our lives. He shook his head. I just gave you a safe place to land. You're the ones who learned how to fly. The safe house in Grosse Pointe sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, tucked beneath mature oak trees and shielded from the world's chaos. The neighborhood moved at a gentler pace, the kind of place where mail trucks still squeaked, wind chimes sang without rhythm, and neighbors waved from porches without prying. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she could breathe deeply again. Each morning, Marcus drove out to check on them. He brought groceries, updates from Ray, fresh books for Sophia, and whenever possible, fresh donuts from a nearby bakery that made everything taste like childhood memories. The days passed peacefully, if cautiously. There was no sign of Deshawn. The family began to relax again. Sarah spent hours in the small backyard, tending to neglected flower beds left by the previous tenant. She had no idea what she was doing, but the work felt necessary, like her hands needed something beautiful to nurture. Sophia, curious and resilient as always, had begun keeping a journal. Sarah found her one afternoon on the porch, legs swinging as she wrote in a purple spiral notebook with a gel pen. What are you writing about? Sarah asked. A story, Sophia said proudly. About a girl who lives in a house that isn't really hers, but she makes it home anyway. Sarah blinked back tears. That sounds like a beautiful story. Sophia shrugged. I just want people to know it's okay to be scared and still be brave at the same time. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart aching with pride. You're already the bravest person I know. That evening, Sarah found Marcus in the kitchen, fixing a dripping faucet. He looked up from under the sink, his dress shirt slightly damp, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Everything okay? He asked. She leaned against the doorframe. Do you ever think about how strange this whole situation is? He wiped his hands on a dish towel. You mean me becoming your personal handyman? She smiled softly. No, I mean the way everything happened. The way you showed up exactly when we needed you most. Marcus stood and crossed the small kitchen. It doesn't feel like coincidence to me. It feels like I was supposed to be in that Target, on that exact day. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. You saved Sophia's life. She saved mine, he said quietly. There was a long pause. Then, almost shyly, she asked, why haven't you ever asked for more? Marcus tilted his head. More what? From me. From this situation. He took a deep breath. Because healing doesn't happen on anyone else's timeline. I'm not here to fix you, Sarah. I'm here to witness your incredible strength. She didn't respond immediately, but her eyes shimmered with something deeper than gratitude. Something like hope. Later that evening, Ray called with news. We got something, he said. Deshawn tried using Sarah's old Michigan ID at a check cashing place in River Rouge. Left perfect fingerprints all over the paperwork. Marcus sat up straighter. And? We're filing charges. Fraud, identity theft, stalking. Warrants should be approved within 24 hours. He's still in the Detroit metro area. Marcus relayed the news to Sarah, who was rocking Isaiah by the living room window. She went completely still. They're actually going to arrest him? That's the plan. She looked down at Isaiah, whose tiny fingers were wrapped around her necklace. What if he doesn't go quietly? Then he learns that actions have real consequences, Marcus said firmly. Sarah turned to face him, the porch light catching her expression, resolute, defiant, and still afraid, but no longer paralyzed by that fear. I want to be there. What? When they arrest him. I want to face him. Marcus stepped forward. Sarah, that's not necessary. We can. It is necessary, she cut him off. I need to look him in the eyes and tell him he doesn't own me anymore. Not my fear. Not my silence. Not my future. Marcus searched her face and saw zero hesitation. Only determination. All right, he said. We'll talk to Ray. The next day, Ray arranged for a coordinated arrest. They knew Deshawn's location, a dive bar in Highland Park where he went every Thursday night to hustle pool and run his mouth. It was risky bringing Sarah. But she insisted, and Marcus didn't argue. That evening, they left Sophia with Mrs. Rodriguez, their kind neighbor who had taken a protective shine to the children. Sarah wore a plain black Nike hoodie, no makeup, her hair pulled back tight. She looked like tempered steel. They waited in an unmarked Ford Explorer a block away from Mickey's Lounge. Ray sat in the driver's seat, eyes on his tablet screen fed by surveillance cameras positioned around the building. There he is, Ray said. Just stepped outside for a smoke. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Marcus touched her shoulder gently. You okay? No, she whispered. But I'm ready. When the officers moved in, it was swift and professional. Deshawn didn't even finish his Marlboro before he was face down on the sidewalk, cuffed, and having his rights read to him. He spat curses, kicked at the officers, threatened everyone within earshot. And then he saw her. Sarah stepped out of the SUV, her face completely calm. You, Deshawn snarled, struggling against the handcuffs. You lying piece of. She stepped closer, just within earshot, but safely behind the police line. You don't scare me anymore. He twisted, trying to lunge toward her. The officers held him back easily. Sarah kept her voice steady and clear. You will never touch my children. You will never steal another breath from my life. This ends here, tonight. Deshawn's face contorted with rage and disbelief. But she didn't flinch. She didn't back down. She stood there like an immovable force. Ray gently guided her back to the vehicle. Marcus followed, staying quiet. Inside the Explorer, Sarah stared straight ahead, breathing slowly and deeply. That was incredibly brave, Marcus said. She shook her head. That was necessary. And as they drove away into the Detroit night that somehow felt lighter, cleaner, Sarah leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She wasn't smiling. But something fundamental inside her had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. 6 months later. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of their new home in Royal Oak, a modest 3-bedroom house with a real backyard where Sophia could play safely. Sarah stood at the stove making pancakes, wearing scrubs from her job at Detroit Children's Hospital, where she now worked as a patient advocate. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, helping Sophia with her second-grade math homework while Isaiah banged cheerfully on his high chair tray. "Mr. Marcus," Sophia said, looking up from her worksheet, "do you think we'll always be a family?" Marcus glanced at Sarah, who turned from the stove with a knowing smile. "Always," he said simply. "Families aren't just about blood. They're about the people who choose to love you every single day." Sarah walked over and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Even when you leave dirty dishes in the sink," she teased. "Hey, that was one time," Marcus protested, grinning. Outside, Detroit was waking up, traffic building on Woodward Avenue, school buses rumbling to life, the city moving forward like it always did. Inside their home, a family that had found each other against all odds was doing the same thing, moving forward, together, one ordinary, beautiful morning at a time. She was reclaiming her life piece by piece, breath by breath. And for the first time in years, the world didn't feel like a trap. It felt like home. The house in Grosse Pointe felt completely different after Deshawn's arrest. There was no official announcement, no celebration party. Yet something in the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted, like windows had finally been thrown open and years of stale fear were drifting away on the Michigan breeze. Sarah stood barefoot in the kitchen the morning after, stirring steel-cut oats while humming an old gospel song her grandmother used to sing. Isaiah sat in his Fisher-Price high chair, banging his tiny hands against the tray, his toothless grin lighting up the entire room. Sophia wandered in with a stack of construction paper and markers, determined to create a certificate of bravery for her mom. Marcus arrived with fresh groceries from Whole Foods and a copy of the Detroit Free Press tucked under his arm. He paused at the front door, taking in the sight through the kitchen window. This family that had become his family, moving through their morning routine like they'd been doing it for years. For a brief, overwhelming moment, it felt like witnessing a miracle he'd been afraid to hope for. Inside, Sarah greeted him with a genuine smile. "You always bring fresh strawberries when you're trying to distract me from something." Marcus grinned. "I bring strawberries because they're perfect in pancakes. Distraction is just a bonus." He placed the newspaper on the kitchen table, folded to a small headline on page 3, "Repeat offender arrested in Highland Park, multiple warrants served." Sarah glanced at it briefly. "I don't need to read about him," she said simply. "He's not the story anymore." Marcus nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. "You're absolutely right. You always were the real story." After breakfast, they all went for a walk around the neighborhood. Marcus pushed Isaiah in a new Graco stroller, Sophia skipped ahead practicing hopscotch patterns on the sidewalk, and Sarah walked slowly beside him, letting the autumn sun warm her shoulders. She wore a soft cream cardigan, dark jeans, and carried herself without any trace of the defensive armor she'd worn for so long. They passed a row of Victorian houses where an elderly couple waved from their front porch. Sophia ran up to pet their golden retriever puppy, and Sarah laughed when the dog tried to lick her face. "This," Sarah said quietly, "is the first morning I've woken up and didn't immediately check every window and door." "That's definitely something worth celebrating," Marcus replied. They stopped at a small neighborhood park with weathered benches and a slightly rusty swing set. Sophia raced toward the swings, calling for Marcus to push her higher. As he obliged, Sarah sat on a bench and watched them with an expression caught somewhere between gratitude and wonder. "Do you ever worry," she asked softly, "that this is all too good to be real? That it's just a beautiful moment before everything falls apart again?" Marcus slowed the swing gently. "I used to think exactly that way. But now I believe in moments like these because they're real, and we fought like hell to earn them." Sarah nodded slowly. "Fighting feels different when you know someone's got your back." She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The understanding between them ran deeper than words. Later that afternoon, Marcus surprised Sarah with a manila folder that looked suspiciously official. Inside was a property deed with her name printed at the top, Sarah Michelle Thompson, sole owner. The house. In Grosse Pointe. Free and clear, he said simply. You bought this place, she whispered, staring at the document. I did. And I'm transferring ownership to you. It's yours legally, no strings attached, no conditions. Sarah's hand started trembling. Marcus, I can't accept something this huge. Yes, you can. Because this isn't charity, it's restoration. You're rebuilding your entire life. You need a solid foundation to build on. Tears filled her eyes. I've never owned anything. Not even a car was ever in my name. Now you own your future, he said gently. Sophia burst in then, covered in glitter, holding her homemade certificate. Mom! I finished it. You're officially the bravest person in the whole entire world. Sarah knelt down, hugging her daughter fiercely. Marcus stepped back, giving them their moment, his heart simultaneously breaking and overflowing. That evening, they had a quiet celebration dinner, just the four of them around the kitchen table. Sarah lit a single vanilla candle in the center, not for ceremony but for meaning. For light conquering darkness. After dessert, Sophia leaned over and whispered conspiratorially to Marcus, "Do you think you'll ever marry my mum?" Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. That's not really up to me, sweetheart. Well, you should, Sophia said with 8-year-old wisdom. You both like cooking, you both worry too much, and you both make me feel safe. That's definitely true love. Marcus laughed until happy tears formed in his eyes, and across the table, Sarah's face glowed with the kind of joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. Later, after the kids were fast asleep, Sarah joined Marcus on the front porch. The Michigan evening air was crisp and clear. I heard what Sophia said earlier, she said with gentle teasing in her voice. Kids say the most unexpected things, Marcus replied. She's not wrong, though. Marcus turned to face her. Sarah, you don't owe me anything. You never have. I know, she said softly. That's exactly why it means everything. The silence between them was no longer heavy with unspoken fears. It was rich, comfortable, full of possibility. Do you believe in second chances? She asked. I believe in people who fight for them, he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Then maybe I'm starting to believe in them too. The Detroit night air was cool and sweet. Stars scattered overhead like quiet witnesses to their journey. And for the first time since this whole beautiful, chaotic story began, there was nothing chasing them. Only peace. Only the promise of whatever came next. The morning after their porch conversation, Sarah woke before sunrise. The house was still wrapped in comfortable darkness, filled only with Isaiah's soft breathing and the gentle ticking of the kitchen clock. She padded barefoot to the kitchen and stood by the window, watching the sky slowly shift from deep black to pale gold. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the day beginning. But something lingered, a memory she hadn't invited, pressing itself into the quiet morning. She made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the journal she'd been keeping since moving to Grosse Pointe. The pages were filled with fragments of thoughts, hopes, fears she'd been processing. Today, her hand moved slowly across the page, writing a name she hadn't spoken in 15 years. Keisha, asterisk. Her younger sister. The last time they'd spoken was the night before Sarah left home for good, 19 years old, pregnant, terrified, and alone. Keisha had begged her to stay, but Sarah had already packed her fear and stubborn pride into a duffel bag and walked out into a world that didn't care whether she survived. She hadn't heard from Keisha since. Years passed. Life twisted and shattered and slowly rebuilt itself. But that thread between them remained, frayed but never completely broken. Marcus came into the kitchen quietly, rubbing sleep from his eyes. You okay? Sarah nodded. Just thinking. About my sister. I didn't know you had a sister. I do, but I haven't seen her in 15 years. Last I heard, she was still in Chicago, working at the public library. She always loved books more than people. Marcus poured himself coffee. Do you want to try to find her? Sarah hesitated. I'm not sure what I'd even say. Sorry, I disappeared into thin air. Here's my trauma and 2 kids. He leaned against the counter. Maybe you'd just say, I missed you. That afternoon, while Isaiah napped and Sophia created sidewalk art with colored chalk in the driveway, Marcus made some discreet phone calls to a few contacts. By evening, he had a name, an address, and a phone number written on a slip of paper. He handed it to Sarah. She's in Chicago still. Branch manager at the Woodlawn Public Library. Same last name, Richardson. It's definitely her. Sarah stared at the information. I don't know if I'm ready for this. There's no deadline, Marcus said gently. Just possibility. She tucked the paper into her journal. Thank you. That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay awake listening to the house settle around them, memories washing over her in waves, fights with their mother, Keisha reading fairy tales under bedcovers with a flashlight, their shared dreams of escaping their neighborhood someday. The next morning, Sarah stood in the kitchen with her phone in her trembling hand. She dialed the number before she could lose her nerve. The phone rang 3 times. Woodlawn Library, this is Keisha. Sarah's throat closed up completely. Keisha. It's Sarah. The silence on the other end stretched so long Sarah thought the call had dropped. Then she heard it, the sound of someone trying desperately not to cry. I thought you were dead, Keisha whispered. I looked for you for years. Police reports, social services, everything. I'm so sorry, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I should have called. I should have. No, Keisha said firmly. You left because you had to survive. You did what you needed to do. I was angry, but I never stopped loving you. Sarah sank onto the kitchen floor, overwhelmed. I have kids now. A daughter named Sophia, 8 years old. A baby boy, Isaiah. And Keisha. I'm safe now. I'm finally safe. I want to meet them, Keisha said without hesitation. When you're ready. Sarah smiled through her tears. I think I'm ready now. A week later, they made the drive to Chicago. The trip was long but manageable. Sophia sang Disney songs for half the journey, and Isaiah slept peacefully in his car seat. Marcus booked them a modest hotel near the library, letting Sarah control the timing of everything. When Keisha arrived at their hotel lobby, she wore the same bright eyes and gentle smile Sarah remembered from childhood. Her hair was natural now with threads of silver, her frame a little fuller, but the energy was unmistakably the same, kind, fierce, familiar. They stood looking at each other for a long moment before Keisha opened her arms. Come here, sister. The reunion was quiet, no dramatic tears, just long embraces, trembling hands, and whispered apologies passed between sisters who had survived separate storms. Sophia took to Keisha immediately, proudly showing off her artwork and telling elaborate stories about Mr. Marcus who saved us from the scary man. Isaiah clung to Sarah at first, but eventually warmed up, giggling when Keisha made silly faces and sang old Motown songs. Over dinner at a soul food restaurant in Bronzeville, stories spilled like wine, childhood mischief, hard years, dreams deferred and rediscovered. Marcus mostly listened, watching the way Sarah came alive in her sister's presence. Her laughter was freer, her shoulders no longer weighted with constant apology. Later, Keisha pulled Sarah aside while Marcus helped the kids with dessert. You're stronger than I ever imagined you could become, Keisha said softly. Sarah shrugged. I didn't really have a choice. Yes, you did, Keisha said firmly. Every single day, you chose not to break. That's everything. They stood there in the restaurant's hallway, two women who had carried grief in silence for too long, now sharing it aloud. Something inside Sarah softened, a knot she hadn't realized was still clenched tight. "I want Sophia and Isaiah to have real family," Sarah said. "The kind we never had." Keisha smiled. "Baby sister, they already do." Before they left Chicago, Keisha gave Sophia a copy of The Snowy Day, with a handwritten note on the inside cover, "For the bravest girl I know, may your story always be heard." The next morning, on the drive back to Detroit, Sophia sat quietly in the back seat, flipping through the book. "Do we have to wait a long time to see Aunt Keisha again?" she asked. "No, sweetheart," Sarah said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Not anymore." As I-94 stretched ahead of them, lined with autumn sunlight and endless possibility, Sarah knew this chapter wasn't about endings. It was about stitching the past to the present, weaving a tapestry from pain, forgiveness, and new beginnings. It was about reclaiming not just safety, but family. And family, she realized, didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be real. It was a week after returning from Chicago when the letter arrived. Sarah found it tucked between utility bills and grocery store circulars. The envelope was plain white, unmarked except for familiar handwriting she hadn't seen since childhood. No return address. No hints. Just her name written in a gentle cursive of someone who once practiced penmanship on the backs of church bulletins. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she carried it inside, placed it on the kitchen table, and stared at it while Isaiah babbled from his high chair and Sophia painted a picture of their family with stick figures and a sun that took up half the page. Marcus noticed her stillness when he walked in with groceries. "Everything okay?" She slid the envelope toward him. "It's from my mother." Marcus raised his eyebrows but said nothing. "I haven't heard from her in over 12 years, Sarah whispered. "Last I knew, she was still in New Orleans. She always said I brought shame on the family when I left. That I deserved whatever life I got." Marcus sat across from her. "You don't have to open it." "I know," she said. "But I think I want to." After the kids were in bed, Sarah curled up on the front porch with a blanket and chamomile tea. Marcus sat beside her, quiet and patient, as she broke the seal and unfolded the thin notebook paper. Her mother's handwriting was smaller now. Shakier. "Dear Sarah, asterisk. If you're reading this, it means the phone number I found for you was real. I don't know if you'll ever write back. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I haven't earned that kind of grace, asterisk. But I needed to say I'm sorry. For the yelling. For the judgment. For letting my pride speak louder than my love. I lost touch with Keisha for years because of my stubbornness. Then I lost you. And now, every night I sit on this porch wondering if the silence I hear is your voice choosing not to call, asterisk. I hope you found peace. That you found love. That you became the mother I never learned how to be. I hope you can forgive me, even if you never say it out loud, asterisk. All my love, asterisk. Mom. Sarah read it twice, then a third time. By the end, her hands were shaking. Marcus reached for her hand. You okay? She nodded, blinking back tears. I don't know what to feel. I thought I'd buried her voice years ago. But here it is, still alive in my head. She sounds like she's trying, Marcus said gently. Sarah gave a bitter laugh. Trying now. After everything. Marcus didn't argue. He let the silence breathe between them. I don't know if I can forgive her, Sarah said quietly. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, Marcus said. It's about freeing yourself from carrying it. She exhaled slowly, staring into the dark yard. I'll write back. Not today, maybe not this week. But eventually. The following morning, Sarah surprised Marcus by asking if they could take the kids into downtown Detroit. She wanted to visit the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. "It's time Sophia learns where she comes from," Sarah said. "The beautiful parts and the difficult parts." They spent the afternoon exploring the exhibits. Sophia asked dozens of questions, most thoughtful, some hilarious. Isaiah giggled every time he saw photographs of children playing. Standing in front of a display about the Great Migration, Sarah held Sophia's hand and pointed to a map showing families moving north from the south. "Your great-grandmother made this same journey," she told Sophia. "She left Mississippi with nothing but hope and courage." "Just like we did," Sophia said matter-of-factly. Sarah smiled, her heart full. "Yeah, sweetheart. Just like we did." But it was Sarah who lingered longest at one particular display. A worn pair of children's shoes sat behind glass, with a black and white photograph beside them showing a young girl marching with her mother during a civil rights protest in Birmingham, 1963. "She was only 8, Sarah whispered, studying the child's determined face. "Look at her expression, like she knew the world would try to silence her, but she was going to stand tall anyway." Sophia pressed closer to the glass, looking up at the photo. "She looks really brave." "She was," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "And so are you, sweetheart." They moved on to a wall filled with framed letters, poems, and journal entries written by women during times of profound struggle, freedom marches, urban uprisings, quiet moments of resistance. Sarah read one entry aloud, her voice catching. "Even in the fire, I still believe in blooming. Even in the silence, I still sing my name." Asterisk. She turned to Marcus, who had been watching her with quiet reverence. "I want to write something like that. Not for a museum, but for Sophia and Isaiah, so they always know where we came from and how far we've traveled." "You already are writing it," he said softly. "Every single day." Back home that evening, Sarah sat at the dining table and began writing, not to her estranged mother, not yet, but to her children. To Sophia and Isaiah. "There are things I haven't told you yet, not because I'm ashamed, but because they still hurt to remember. I want you to know that I've walked through fire. I've been broken, terrified, completely alone. But I never stopped loving you. Even before you were born, you were the reason I kept breathing." Asterisk. "I didn't grow up in a house filled with warmth and safety, but I've learned to build that warmth piece by piece. I've learned to trust again, and to fight for peace. You deserve a world so much better than the one I knew, and I'll spend every breath I have trying to create it for you." Asterisk. "With all my love." Asterisk. "Your mum." Asterisk. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it in a small wooden keepsake box she'd found at a thrift store the week before. She would fill that box with more letters over time, truths, memories, reminders, because stories weren't just preserved in museums. They were passed through whispers, through words, through the brave act of telling. For the first time, Sarah wasn't just surviving her past. She was reclaiming it, one letter at a time. A few weeks after their museum visit, Sarah received an unexpected email from the Detroit Community Center. "We're hosting a community panel on overcoming adversity and rebuilding after trauma. We'd love to have you speak about your journey. The event is next month, would you consider sharing your story?" Asterisk. At first, she laughed. Not from joy, but from complete disbelief. "Me? On a speaking panel?" Marcus looked up from the Detroit news. "Why not you?" "I'm not a public speaker," she said, pacing the kitchen. "I'm just figuring my own life out day by day. I wouldn't even know what to say." "You tell the truth," Marcus replied simply. "And that's more powerful than any prepared speech." Sarah let the idea simmer for several days. The thought of standing in front of strangers made her stomach twist with anxiety, but the possibility of sharing her story, maybe helping someone else who was drowning, kept pulling at her. One quiet evening, she sat at her desk with a blank notepad. At the top, she wrote, "What I know now." She didn't write a formal speech. She wrote her story. The night of the panel, the event was held in Cass Technical High School's auditorium, modest but packed with community members. Folding chairs stretched across the floor, and warm lights hung overhead. On stage sat 4 chairs and a simple table with bottles of water. The other speakers were already seated, an addiction recovery counselor, a formerly incarcerated youth mentor, and a domestic violence survivor who had become a therapist. Sarah felt completely out of place in her simple navy dress, her hands trembling slightly as she walked onto the stage. But when the moderator introduced her, a mother, a fighter, a woman rebuilding her life one day at a time, the applause surprised her with its warmth. She took a deep breath and began. I used to think that surviving was enough. That waking up each day without completely falling apart meant I was doing okay. But then I had my daughter, and surviving wasn't nearly enough anymore. She needed more than that. She deserved more than that. The auditorium grew completely still. I left a man who convinced me I was worthless. I lived under an overpass with my babies. I begged strangers for formula money. And then one day, a man in a Target didn't just look through me like I was invisible. He saw me, not just the dirt on my clothes or the desperation in my eyes, but me. She glanced at Marcus in the audience. He gave her a small nod, steady and proud. I've been afraid every single day since then. But I keep choosing to show up anyway, for my kids, for myself, and for every woman sitting in this room who thinks she's too broken to start over. When she finished, the auditorium was silent for a heartbeat before erupting in sustained applause. Several women in the audience were wiping tears from their eyes. During the Q&A portion, a young mother raised her hand. How do you stop feeling like you don't deserve good things? Sarah's answer came from her heart, you practice. Every morning, you wake up and practice believing you matter. Some days you'll fail at it. But you keep practicing anyway. After the event, 3 different women approached Sarah. One asking for her phone number, another sharing her own story, a third simply saying, thank you for making me feel less alone. Driving home that night, Sarah felt something she'd never experienced before, the profound power of using her voice not just to survive, but to heal. People stood and applauded. Some wiped away tears. A few approached her afterward to share their own stories, to hug her, to tell her that her words had given them something they thought they'd lost forever, hope. One young woman clutched Sarah's hand and whispered, I'm leaving him tonight. Because of you. Sarah held her close, whispering back, you're not alone in this. After the panel, Marcus drove her home through the warm Detroit evening. The windows were rolled down, spring air flowing in along with distant music from someone's backyard cookout. You were absolutely incredible up there, he said. I was terrified the entire time. You didn't show it at all. She turned to face him. You were right. Telling the truth really is powerful. I didn't do anything. You're the one who lived through it all. No, she said softly. You helped me remember that I was worth fighting for. He reached for her hand at the red light. Always. Back home, Sophia greeted them in her pajamas, waving a homemade poster that read, Go MOM, in glittery crayon. Isaiah babbled happily from his playpen, and Keisha, who had driven down from Chicago to babysit, smiled from the kitchen doorway. I heard you brought down the house, Keisha teased, handing Sarah a steaming cup of chamomile tea. I didn't faint or throw up, so that's a victory. They laughed together, and Sarah felt warmth spreading through her chest, something deeper than happiness. Something like genuine peace. That night, after the kids were asleep, Sarah returned to her letter-writing box. She pulled out fresh stationery and began another note. To the woman who finds this someday, maybe you're standing where I once stood. In a grocery store checkout line, in a courtroom, in a shelter. Maybe you're shaking with fear, shame, or the quiet ache of feeling invisible, *. I see you. I was you. And I need you to know something no one told me when I needed to hear it most. Your story is not over. You are not defined by your wounds. You are not the sum of who left you or who hurt you. You are still whole, even in pieces, asterisk. Somewhere out there, someone is waiting to hear your truth. Speak it, asterisk. With all my love and strength, asterisk. Sarah asterisk. She sealed the letter and placed it beneath the others. The box was growing heavier, but so was her voice. And somewhere in the world, maybe that voice would become light for someone else, just like Marcus had once been light for her. The morning after the speaking event, Sarah found herself standing in the empty back room of their house, the one they'd been using for storage since moving in. Sunlight filtered through dusty blinds, casting long streaks across cardboard boxes marked miscellaneous and winter stuff. She stared at the space, envisioning something completely different. A desk by the window. Shelves lined with journals and books. Maybe a bulletin board filled with ideas, dreams, fragments of the past transformed into something new. Marcus found her there an hour later, sleeves rolled up and hair tied back, dragging an old filing cabinet across the hardwood floor. Starting a renovation project, he asked. I'm making a writing room, she said, slightly breathless. Or at least a quiet corner where the kids don't use my manuscript pages as coloring books. He grinned. Need some help? Together, they cleared the room, lifting, sorting, laughing when they uncovered a box of Christmas decorations Sophia had labeled Santa's stuff, not trash, in purple marker. By noon. You don't owe him anything, Marcus said gently. I know, she whispered. But part of me needs to hear it. Not for him, for me. For closure. You don't have to decide right now. She nodded. I won't rush into anything. But I won't ignore it either. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Sarah sat at her writing desk and composed a letter, not a reply she intended to send, but words she needed to write for herself. Deshaun. You shattered me. You broke things in me I didn't even know could crack. You made me question my worth, my strength, my voice. But I found all of those things again, without you, in spite of you, maybe even because of you, but never with you. I don't need your apology to heal, but I hope for your own soul that you mean it. If you ever have contact with Sophia or Isaiah, it will be because they choose it as adults, not because I let you back into our lives. You lost that right when you chose violence over love. I forgive you because I want peace in my own heart, but I won't forget what you did, and I won't go backward. Sarah. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the wooden box with all the others. Another chapter written. Another page turned toward the future. A few days later, Sarah attended her first advisory board meeting. It was held in a community space in Corktown, where folding chairs were worn but welcoming and coffee came in mismatched thrift store mugs. The other board members, mostly older women, social workers, and counselors, greeted her with genuine warmth. They discussed upcoming projects, transitional housing initiatives for women leaving abusive relationships, mentorship programs for teenage mothers, emergency food distribution programs. Sarah listened intently, took careful notes, then raised her hand. I'd like to propose a writing workshop, she said, her voice steady. For survivors. A place where they can tell their own stories. Not just for personal healing, but to reclaim control of their narrative. The room grew thoughtfully quiet. One of the veteran board members, Ms. Linda Washington, nodded slowly. That's powerful work. What would you call it? Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled. Still standing. Within weeks, bright yellow flyers appeared at shelters, clinics, and community centers throughout Detroit. Still standing. A free weekly writing circle for women reclaiming their voices asterisk. Every Thursday, 6 p.m. Detroit Community Center. Sarah led the first session with trembling hands and a hopeful heart. 10 women came that evening, all different ages, all carrying invisible scars, all searching for something they couldn't quite name. She didn't start with rules or writing prompts. She started with a simple question. When was the first time you realized you were more than what happened to you? The answers came slowly at first, then like floodgates opening. Tears, nervous laughter, quiet rage, profound relief. By the end of 2 hours, every woman had written something, a line, a memory, a hard-won truth. Sarah read hers aloud last. I begged for baby formula and found a miracle. I thought I was falling apart, but it was the beginning of becoming whole. After the session, as the women filed out exchanging phone numbers and promising to return next week, one young mother approached Sarah. Thank you, she said simply. For the first time in years, I feel like my story matters. It does, Sarah replied. It always has. The still standing writing group had grown to 3 sessions a week, with a waiting list. Sarah's book, Invisible No More, A Mother's Journey from Survival to Purpose, had been picked up by a small publisher and was scheduled for release in the spring. Marcus had officially moved in 6 months ago, and the kids had started calling him Dad Marcus without anyone suggesting it. The house in Grosse Pointe felt like what Sarah had always imagined home should be, full of laughter, scattered toys, and the comfortable chaos of family life. On a crisp autumn evening, Sarah stood in her writing room, looking at the wall where she'd hung framed letters from women in her writing group. Testimonials of healing, strength, and hope. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Dinner's ready. Sophia helped me make her famous spaghetti. Famous because she uses an entire bottle of Parmesan cheese. That's the secret ingredient, he grinned. As they walked toward the kitchen together, Sarah caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the scared, broken person who had stood in that Target checkout line 2 years ago. This woman stood tall. This woman owned her story. This woman was no longer invisible. She was still standing. The women in the writing circle clapped softly, their faces glowing with shared understanding. One reached out, touching Sarah's hand gently. You made this feel possible, she whispered. Sarah smiled. You all make it real. Back home in Grosse Pointe, Sophia was waiting with a surprise. She had transformed a Nike shoebox into her own letter collection, just like her mom's. On the lid, she had written in purple crayon, My Big Brave Feelings. She proudly showed Sarah her first entry. Dear future me, don't be scared to be loud. Don't let anyone tell you you're too much. Remember you come from strong people, and chicken soup always helps when you're sad. Love, Sophia, age 8. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You're going to change the world, baby girl. No, Sophia said with 8-year-old wisdom, I'm going to write about it. And just like that, Sarah realized every scar had become a sentence. Every hurt, a comma. Every act of survival, a period at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Her story was no longer about escape. It had become a legacy. And she was still writing it. It was the first warm Saturday of spring when the phone call came. Sarah had just finished hanging laundry in the backyard, Isaiah babbling happily in the grass beside her, Sophia crouched nearby drawing chalk masterpieces on the stepping stones. Marcus was inside preparing lunch, humming an old Stevie Wonder song. Her iPhone buzzed on the patio table. Hello, she answered, wiping her hands on her jeans. A professional woman's voice spoke, calm but purposeful. Ms. Thompson. This is Warden Patricia Davis from Wayne County Correctional. I'm calling about Deshaun Johnson. Sarah's stomach clenched. Is he? He's not in any trouble, the warden added quickly. Actually, he's part of our rehabilitation program now, and he's requested permission to quote something you wrote in his presentation to other inmates. Sarah blinked in confusion. What did I write? He said you never sent a letter, but he knew what it would have said. He wanted to share these words, I forgive you because I want peace, but I won't forget, and I won't go back." Sarah's heart skipped. Those were the exact words from the unsent letter in her writing box. How could he possibly? He said he spent 2 years in recovery learning to understand the pain he caused. He believes those would be your words because he's finally learned to hear what he put you through. Silence stretched between them. What exactly does he want to do with this? Sarah asked. He's speaking to inmates about genuine accountability, not just saying sorry, but understanding the lasting impact of their actions. He wants to tell them that real forgiveness comes when victims choose healing for themselves, not when abusers ask for it. Sarah stood quietly for a long moment, watching her children play safely in their own backyard. "Yes," she said finally. "He can use those words. Thank you. You should know, he's different now. Completely. He'll be released next year, but he's moving to Oregon to work with a nonprofit. He has no intention of disrupting your life." When the call ended, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected, genuine peace. Not because Deshaun had changed, but because his transformation didn't matter to her healing anymore. She had moved so far beyond that chapter that his growth was simply irrelevant to her story. She walked back inside and found Marcus dicing vegetables for sandwiches. "That was the prison," she said. "Deshaun's using part of my letter, the one I never sent, in a program for other inmates." Marcus dried his hands, studying her face. "How do you feel about that?" "Lighter," she said honestly. "Not because of him, but because that door is finally closed. That version of me has been laid to rest." She joined him at the counter, slicing fresh tomatoes from their garden. "I'm thinking of organizing a public reading at the community center. Give the women in my writing group a platform beyond our Thursday night circle." Marcus grinned. "I'll claim the front row seat." 2 weeks later, the Detroit Community Center was transformed. Volunteers had strung fairy lights across the ceiling and arranged rows of folding chairs. The aroma of homemade cookies and fresh coffee filled the air. A simple stage stood at the front with a hand-painted banner, "Still Standing, Voices of Survival." The room filled quickly with neighbors, college students, social workers, advocates, and survivors. Sarah wore a simple navy dress and minimal makeup. She didn't need armor tonight, only authenticity. She opened the evening with these words. "Tonight isn't about our pain. It's about our power. About reclaiming our narratives and sharing them without shame." One by one, the women took the stage. They read poems, journal entries, letters to their younger selves. There was laughter, tears, moments of profound silence. But through it all, there was a collective heartbeat, steady, resilient, fierce. When Sarah's turn came, she stepped up and opened her worn notebook. "I used to be invisible," she began. "But tonight, I stand here fully seen." She shared the opening chapter of her memoir, the night at Target, the promise she made to the stranger who bought formula, and the words that started everything, "I promise to pay you back when I grow up." The room was completely still. She closed with the same line that ended every writing workshop, "I begged for baby formula and found a miracle. I thought I was falling apart, but it was the beginning of becoming whole." When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, as guests mingled and soft jazz played in the background, an elderly woman approached her, a stranger with silver hair and kind eyes. "I don't know you personally," the woman said, "but I feel like I've known you forever. Your story, it was mine once, 40 years ago. And now, I think I'm finally ready to tell it." Sarah embraced her warmly. That night, as they packed up chairs and turned off lights, Sophia ran up holding a paper crown made from folded event flyers. "I made you something," she announced, "because you're the queen of being brave." Sarah laughed through happy tears and knelt down. "Then you must be the princess." "Nope," Sophia said proudly. "I'm the author." At home, after the kids were asleep, Sarah sat one final time at her writing desk. The memoir manuscript was nearly complete. She wrote the closing lines with steady hands. This is not a story about rescue. This is a story about choosing to live fully, even when life gives you every reason to give up. And if you're reading these words, you've already begun your own journey of choosing. Keep choosing. Keep writing. Keep standing. She closed the notebook and looked out at the Detroit skyline twinkling in the distance. Her heart was full. Her voice was strong. Her children were safe and thriving. And somewhere out there, another woman was just beginning to discover that she, too, was still standing. Sparkles, if this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel seen, hopeful, or reminded you of your own strength, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe and stay with us, because there are more voices, more journeys, and more powerful truths still waiting to be told. Every scar can become a sentence. Every survival can become a story. And the next one might just be the one you need. Open book, stay tuned, more chapters are coming.